Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session about Apache Maven and Java 9. And when I proposed this talk, Java 10 wasn't there yet. But right now, there's no reason to jump into Java 9 only. So I added 10. And actually, I expect that even future versions of Java are not an issue with Apache Maven. So my name is Robert Scholte. And in front of me is sitting Hervé Boutemy. He's my backup, but he says, I fully trust you, just do your story. So I'm here on stage. The good news, let's start with this. Maven runs fine on Java 9 and 10. And if there are any issues, they are probably related to plugins. And it's quite easy to fix that. It's just a matter of trying to upgrade to the latest version, and if the maintainers of that plugin fix that issue, you should be okay. Now, there's this misconception that Maven didn't run fine on Java 9, but it was actually that I was part of the expert group for the modular system, and we were quite critical about specifications, and that's maybe what people translated to it didn't run, but it was fine. So I will talk about a couple of topics that were part of our discussions. But first, let's say this also. If you want to apply a module descriptor, it's quite easy. You simply add the module info.-java to your source main Java. You upgrade the Maven compiler plugin. This is the version that really supports the module path and the class path. And step 3, there is no step 3. This is all you have to do to make it work. And this worked because Maven can calculate based on all the jars which you normally put on the class path. He can decide if they belong to the class path or module path based on the original descriptor. So there is no things you need to add to the POM file to the dependencies, or there's no new elements or scope or what we had to add. This is all you need to do. So let's now start about the discussions we had. So when two worlds collide, we had Maven and Java before 9, so 8 and before, and they were quite separated. But then 9 came, and there's an overlap between them. For those who already seen the module descriptor, there's now this requirements, and requirements looks a bit like dependencies in Maven, and that caused a lot of discussions. And this is what we said, is that if you're not careful with your modularization, it's still a hard word to pronounce, you can corrupt the Maven ecosystem. I assume that most of you are application builders, so you should recognize these kinds of issues, but especially the library builders should be aware of the impact when they add multi-descriptors to their jar files. And in the end, the whole discussion is about module names. So what is a proper module name? And it reminds me, what was a good group ID and artifact ID? When I first started with Maven, I also had trouble understanding what is really the group ID. And in the beginning, you quite often saw that the group ID and artifact ID were just the same thing, until everybody started to understand that they are really two different things. The group ID is a namespace, and the artifact ID is actually the real file. What we said is that module names should be as unique as the coordinates of dependencies to prevent collisions. And these were the two things we really had issues with when discussing this with Oracle and the Jigsaw team. So one is about numbers in module names, and the other about automatic module names. But let's first start with the numbers. Because they said that module names, they should not be part of the numbers should not be part of the module names, because they could reflect versions. So they don't want to allow that. So we asked somebody from Maven Central to do some analysis, and we discovered that close to 30,000 group body artifact ID combinations, there were the artifact ID was really ending on a number, and for good reasons. The first column you see products and project names which end with a number, and you can see that Amazon probably likes to end their products with a number. C3PO, DB2, Fabricate, all these kinds of things ends with a number, and when they wanted to translate this to a module name, they would just remove the number, and that would be weird if you have a product that ends with a number and it suddenly is just DB or just C3P. It's weird. The other one is about versioned libraries, and the one we're always talking about is commons-lang. And what commons-lang did, and it was a really good thing, is commons-lang 3 was not backwards compatible with commons-lang 2. So they introduced a new artifact ID, repackaged everything, and because of that, it was possible to have both commons-lang 2 and commons-lang 3 on the class path, or module path in this case. If we would remove the numbers, then it would not be possible anymore to have both on the module path. And the last column is about, I would call them bridge libraries. And even Maven self uses these kinds of bridge libraries. So for Surefire, we had different implementations based on the version of JUnit. So that was for us a good reason to start this discussion. And this was the result in the end, that they finally allowed that numbers of that module names are allowed to end on a number. So, perfect. Then the next topic is about automatic module names, and this was a very, very hard discussion. Because if you read the specifications, the last line says that the module name is otherwise derived from the name of the jar file. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, somebody came to me and said, well, this reminds me of the NPM problem. Anyone aware of this issue? Okay, so what happened is that there was this very small library, it was called Kick, and it was used by quite a lot of other NPM libraries. And there was this company who also had a product called Kick, and they went to this developer and said, well, you are using our name, please remove it from the NPM registry. So they had some kind of lawyer fight and whatever. So the developer decided to remove his work completely from the repository, and suddenly a lot, I think it was about over 10,000 projects were suddenly broken because of this. And the whole issue is that Kick of NPM didn't have namespaces like we have group IDs. So we warned Oracle as well that something like this would happen probably. So again, we went to Central and asked for the statistics about how often artifact IDs are used. So here you see in the first line the name of the artifact ID, and in the next you see that how many different group IDs they can have. Okay, so maybe it's not a little bit fair because the one surrounded are actually POM files. Those are not jar files, so you can remove them. But if you look at the library, with Java 8 it is possible to put all these 391 on the class path without any issue. And with the original specification of the modular system, you could only allow one of those on the module path. So it's not just those 13,500 rows, it is a huge number of collisions you can have, and which were allowed on the class path but not anymore on the module path. So Jigsaw, their team says automatic modules are required for top-down adoption. So that means that you as application builders, if you want to make your project modular, automatic modules are required, whereas we from Maven said referring to automatic modules will cause collisions sooner or later, with the example of NPM making it quite clear, I hope. So what we say is library builders should never refer to automatic modules if they want to deploy it to a repository like Maven Central. On the other hand, application builders can choose to refer to automatic modules because they are probably, in the end, the only users of that jar. So in case of applications, we recognize them by module descriptors without exports because it's an application. They are not used by other applications, otherwise it would be a library. In that case, the Maven compiler plugin logs an info message that you are actually using automatic module. However, if you are using a library, you get this great block around it and you get a real warning. And tip, I hope a lot of you are already using Maven 3.5.0 or more recent, and you have color support, thanks to Hervé. Who's using this version? You like it? Great, perfect. So in this case, you will see the warning quite clear. So automatic module names are therefore top-down migration. But what about the in-the-middle libraries? And if you go, this is what the official statement is, and it says Java platform. It will be approachable, easy to learn, easy to use, so that developers can use it to construct and maintain libraries and large applications. And I thought about large applications. I think this is not really true. I think I'm only aware of one large application that is modularized, and that's the JDK itself. I think all other large applications will have issues when they want to become modularized. So for those who have seen Mark Reinold, Alex Buxley, or other people, this is the example they use quite often to explain how you can modularize your project. So both from the developers of the My app, but also the ones developing Jackson. But this is the conference example. If you take a look at a real-world example, it's much more like this. So we have this application, it's called My App, and it has in its POM, of course, the direct dependencies, those libraries. But they can also have libraries, so the so-called transitive libraries. And then in the bottom, you have the independent dependencies, which only use code from the JDK or the JRE itself. And this kind of things, they can cause issues. So let's go for an example. We have this great classic jar. It's library A version 1.0, and it has no module descriptor. It's just a classic jar. That's day one. And on the next day, there's this library B, and it wants to use library A. So it's saying, well, okay, I'm going to add this module descriptor with my name or .lib.b, and I say requires library A because it's based on a file name. Then library A says, well, you know, I'm going to add a module descriptor, and I'm going to call my module com.lib.a. And then we have this library C. It's called or.lib.c, and it requires A, and that's based on the descriptor, and because it knows the name, it's called com.lib.a, so that's the one he is requiring. And in the end, we have this application. So it's called D, and it's using both library B and C. So this maybe looks a bit complex, but let's review it again. So this is project D, and it has a couple of dependencies, B and C. And if we redraw that, it'll look a bit like this. So we have application d.jar with a name, and it requires B and C, and B, the module B, requires library A, and C requires com.lib.a. Something like this. So because these dependencies from library A, Maven recognizes that this is exactly the same library, but just with different versions. So it will pick the first, and then we have an issue because this code won't compile, because it says library C requires com.lib.a, and it's not there anymore. So even though you didn't change any of your code, you just added one other dependency, it's suddenly broken. So what we can do is we can try to reverse it. So let's go back to this picture, and now we have C on top and B below. And that means that now library A 2.0 is first loaded, and then library 1. Again, Maven recognizes it's the same library, just different versions. And again, it won't compile. And the reason is again, library.a doesn't exist, even though you might think that the first one, it has the name of the jar. But the specification says that every jar can have exactly one module name. So this is the kind of issues we expect to happen. And the solution they finally found or accepted, and this is one of the reasons why Java 9 was delayed, is with the introduction of the automatic module name. And you can put it in your manifest file, and there you specify the name of the module or the name of the module that you want to be used by other consumers. So in this case, library B was just too early to refer to another jar, to another module. So what library B should have done, it should have said, well, I cannot depend on file-based modules, so I add this automatic module name to the manifest file. And that way, my application D could use B as a module. But again, here's also a point of no return. And this looks maybe a bit mathematical, but what it is saying is once I refer to a library based on its module name, I cannot go back to a previous version. So in this case, library C says I require com.lib.a, and library A 2.0 was the first one with this module name. Suppose this one has a bug, I cannot go back to library A 1.0 because then again there's a mismatch with the module name. So that's the point of no returns. So really be careful when you start adopting these kinds of modules and these inside your module descriptor. So the strong advices are: make sure your projects are Java 9 ready, which means no split packages and no root clauses. So for those, I hope that other people have already seen a lot about Java 9, and this should be, I hope, known issues. Otherwise, you should look for other conference talks about this. For libraries that depend on at least one file-based auto module, don't add a module descriptor yet, but start adding a manifest file with the automatic module name, and that would be a good start to help the whole Java ecosystem to become modularized. And pick your module name with care. Like I said, the kick example is just quite a clear example. And here they say, well, use the shared package, so the reverse DNS, as the base of your module name. Mistakes will happen. And in fact, we already have the first invalid modules are already in Maven Central. I don't think Remy likes this, but Remy, he was working on this ASM library, and he pushed 3 of them to Maven Central, but they all contain the same packages, which could again mean that if some projects refer to the first and another one to the second, it would be a collision again, because it's not allowed to have the same classes in different packages. And as an application developer, you cannot fix this, because requires really means required. It must be there. Maven has the option to exclude specific dependencies, and that's not there in the Maven in a module descriptor. This issue was fixed for ASM 6.0 by simply saying we're not going to use those all artifacts anymore, and debugger is included by default. So some tips when you want to start using Java 9. Don't change your folder structure. If you take a look at the talks on other conferences, most of the time they use the Java compiler directly on the command line. But we're using Maven here, so there's no need for this extra directory folder with the module name in it. Just keep source main Java, and there you can put your module descriptor. Module path or class path, like I said, it's not really an issue. Maven can solve that for you. We've written a library, it's called Plexus Java, and that is the one that's going to help us to identify which of the jars belongs to the class path and which belong to the module path. So of course there are a lot of issues, and even if you have issues, these are the things you can have a look at. Stack Overflow, perfect location to look for these kinds of questions. At Apache Maven we have our mailing lists. Take a look there. Maybe your answer is already, your question is already answered there. And if it is really a bug or an improvement, you can go to our Jira page and put it there. And number 10, contact Hervé or me to try to fix some things. And talking about this, quite often if I take a look at Stack Overflow, I see something like this. Source target 1.9. And Java 9 came with this great improvement by introducing, is big enough? Release 9. And this is in the end almost the same as source and target 9, but it's even stronger. And it's actually based on a library that we use quite often within a Maven, and that's called the animal sniffer. And it has to do with the version of Java you run and the target and source you really want to. So for instance, if I am running my compiler on Java 8, but I want my code being compatible with Java 6, you should use the animal sniffer, because that's the one that is able to recognize if all your classes and methods are actually there. So at Oracle they got quite a lot of complaints about some things that weren't working, but they said, well, what you are doing is not correct. Source and target is often not enough. You should also specify the boot class path. And in Java 9 they fixed this by creating this option. So source target, always replace it with release. So I'm going quite fast, but are there questions? And of course there are, but I'm pretty sure that there are two questions I can predict. One is, can every project become modular? And sadly the answer is no. And the reason is that Java 9 is really a game changer. It introduces new rules. Like I already showed you, that it is not you cannot have classes in the root of your jar anymore. This split package issue is also one we expect quite often to hit. So the older projects, they probably can just not follow these rules, and that's not really an issue, because the class path is still there and it will stay there forever. So I would say old projects, just leave them on this on the class path with the rules you know with Java 8. Once you start a new project based on Java 9, that's the moment you can think of, okay, I know about the split package issue, so I know how to define my packages, and you can decide if you want to add a module descriptor, but at least start first with choosing the right package names. This is one of the most asked questions every time I'm on a stage. This is one. Will Maven generate the module descriptor? Because you have the POM file with all the dependencies in it, right? And that's exactly the same as requires, right? Well, again, no. Sorry. And one of the reasons is they have completely different purpose. So in the dependencies, you specify actually a coordinate to a specific file. Whereas the requirements, it's about the availability of that jar file. So it's really two different things. And also, not all modules are dependencies. So the ones inside the JDK or JRE, you cannot specify those as dependencies, but you need to specify them as a requirement. And there are more elements in the module descriptor, for instance, the module name. Where do you specify that inside your POM file? Or if the module is open or not, where do you specify the exported packages or the services which you use and provide? And in the end, the current POM model 4.0.0 has no space for new elements. There's an XSD specification for it, and it's quite strict. We don't know if everybody is using it. We at Maven do it. Every time we check if once it is reading POM file, if all the elements really exist according to this specification. And we are thinking about a new model version, which will be a huge improvement, but that's not right now possible. The other one is about POM hygiene. Who's using the dependency analyze? Okay. So what this plugin does, it verifies if all the dependencies you have used in your POM file, if they are used and declared, or if they are used but undeclared, and that means that those are actually transitive dependencies. And you can also have dependencies you have specified, but they are not used. So in that case, if we would automatically generate the module descriptor, those things would become requirements. And then again, we already said that you cannot exclude requirements. Requirements must be there. That's completely different compared to dependencies. So it's quite likely that if we would generate these kinds of module descriptors, it would be much more than you really want to. So, but JDEPS can do this, right? So who knows the tool JDEPS? Okay, perfect. There's also a Maven plugin for it. And yes, it can do it, but it is a rough module descriptor. And it is intended to help you with the first time you want to create your module descriptor. So it already knows which are all the requirements, and it exports all the packages, and then it's up to you to specify which are actually internal packages, so you should remove them again. And it uses the binary classes. So you want to have this module descriptor normally before the compilation. And this would be weird. So if we want to use JDEPS, we should compile first. Then we can use JDEPS to generate the descriptor, and then we can recompile again to verify if really everything is there. So JDEPS is not the right tool to solve this. This is just a tool to help you with the first module descriptor. But we are sure that some open source project thinks we are wrong in this about this thing, and actually there is already one, and it's called Modetect. And Modetect is one where you specify inside your POM file that you want to create module descriptor. But I noticed that once this is becoming newer and newer, you see that actually all the information you normally had inside your module.info.java is actually copied to the POM file. So the POM file becomes again larger, and it's already large. So it's really up to you. So do you want to specify it inside the POM file, or do you want to leave it in your source main Java location? Okay, so that's that. So are there any other questions? I'm pretty sure. Yes. Multi-release. That's a whole another topic. So let me first explain what the multi-release jar is. So the multi-release jar, it's a structure inside the jar where you can specify that some code is only can be used with Java 10 or 11 or newer versions, and it's actually inside the meta-inf folder. And we created, actually Hervé did that, he created an example about how we think that you should create your model descriptor. And it's an example that's actually already working right now. It is in the end a Maven multi-module project. It looks a bit weird because in the end it will generate one jar. But this way we can be certain that all the versions of Java are executed and tested and compiled with the right version. So it's not the most cleanest version, but the architecture of Maven just doesn't allow it to have a better solution right now. And we've seen other persons trying to figure out their own mechanisms. I think there are around 3 or 4 patents how to create a multi-release jar. Yes? More, yes.
How test can run in a multi-module path?
How you can run a multi-module path?
How do you run tests?
Tests. Oh, it's solved for you. So JUnit is aware of also that it's the latest version of the Maven Surefire plugin, which is aware of both the class path and the module path, and it's actually using the same code used by the test compile goal. And there it again knows which dependencies are the test scopes dependencies end up on the class path and the original are on the module path. It really works out of the box. You should try it. It's great work. Other questions? Here. Oh, sorry, microphone first.
Is there any effort to go further for Maven with a new POM version and a new release to have a symmetric with module and POM?
So
you talk about it later about we need a new
yes.
POM.
So the short answer is no, and I think that if this whole modular system was invented probably 10 years ago or 15 years, the whole POM file would probably look to have differently. That's what I expect. But now we are just those are really two different worlds, and Gradle has their own way of working with this. Maven has their own way. So this is the best solution we could think of. So the next version of POM 5.0.0, it will only add elements probably to the current POM version, but it has nothing to do with the Java modular system. And also that I think that's correct because the POM file is not about just Java. You can have multiple languages which can be built with Maven. So that's the reason why we keep it as it is probably. More questions? Yes.
As library developer, there is a good practice or something to name our module. I mean, should I go with my group ID, concatenate to the artifact ID or something else? There is best practice to name my module for Java 9.
Yes. So what you do is look inside your jar and find the first class, and then you have your part of the package, and that should be your module name. So that's the best practice. And it makes sense because that package needs to be unique. And the module name also has to be unique. So why not use that at both places?
You said the class path will always be there. Are you sure about it?
Yes. I asked Mark Reinhold, and yes. And it's just that we don't know how much time it will take before everything becomes modular. In fact, I'm not sure if everything will become modular. For instance, Maven itself, in its current state, it's not possible to make it modular because we have this split package issue. It's quite simple, and we don't need to be modular, actually, so we're doing quite well. So the question is, when will be the next version of the POM available? Well, the whole issue with the Maven team is that there's no company behind it. So we have a small group of active committers, and they all do it in their spare time. And Java 9 claimed quite a lot of time, and we have too much IDs, and everybody right now is your stuff needs to work with Java 10. We're already preparing everything for 11. So actually, this new pace of Java is slowing down the real development on Maven, and that's a pity, I think. So I cannot give you any date on that. Sorry, but we could use some help.
Maybe one more.
Yes, sure.
Do you have any news of Jason Van Zyl? Does he still work on this project?
Okay.
It was one of the leaders.
So let me. I have time enough, so let's do a demo. Demo. Here it is. So what I'm going to do is, this is quite an old example of the Maven by example book. So this was, I think, written in 2005, and it was no, not this one. And I'm going to do this without IDE. It should be okay. So this one was still being compiled with Java 5. As we know, I hope, Java 9 has dropped support for compiling against Java 5. So it's 6, 7, 8, or 9. And what we're going to do is let's make 9 of it, I think. And I said, actually, let's use the Maven release tag, of course. So let's first upgrade to 3.7.0. And let's change this to, I made a typo. Ah, yes, thank you. That will save some time. So here. Oh, this is terrible. Okay, release. All fine? Okay. Then let's go here. Commands. So let's say Java 11. I have the early access of Java 11 here. Ah, no clean red. It's the first time. Sorry. Bad practice. So this really, this is over 10 years old, this project, and we can simply compile it with Java 11. Now it's Java 9 compatible. So does that answer your question? No? So what do you want to know? No? Okay. Impressed? This is overwhelming. It's really out of the box, and this is really. I think we only had one issue in the beginning with the really first version of the Jigsaw early access version that Maven didn't run. Actually, Maven did run, but Maven compiler plugin had an issue because it could not find the compiler on the class path. It was not accessible. And they fixed it within 2 days, and from that moment on, Maven just runs fine on Java 9. It rhymes. Sorry? The meta. The metadata. I'm not sure what you mean with that. The meta-inf? Sure. Yes. Okay. Yes. Target classes. It's not here, and it was probably never there. So. Okay. So in this case, there was no multi-descriptor, so everything stays on the class path. So once I would add a multi-descriptor, it will decide which parts will become on the class path and module path. And if you run the project with debug logging, you will see it. So it will say class path, this entry is module path, these entries. Yes? I think that's it for now. I would like to thank you very much. Have a nice day.